Hi Guy, welcome to episode 11 of the AMIGArama podcast. I'm your host Lefarius, and this week we will be having a look at Batman the Movie, The Game. I don't know if that's the full title or not, I always get confused. But anyway, a bit of AMIGArama news first of all. One thing you might not be aware of last week with the Flight of the Amazon episode, I've started doing gameplay footage. I mean, that's entirely me, sat down playing the game through as far as possible and then matching up to the podcast and then sticking it up on YouTube. Now, last week was my first episode playing around with it, so I'm still learning my way around the basics, but I was sort of pleased with how it turned out. I'm getting a bit better at video editing and stuff, but I've got a YouTube channel up. It's just called Lefarius. That's Lorfarius. And you'll be able to see all the episodes I've done so far up on there. As always, I will stick them up on the AMIGArama.com website, so you should be able to watch them from within the page as well. But yeah, I'm going to try and do that every week. It depends on the length of the show. Last week's was a good 30 minutes, and it was a bit of a pain out to play the game through constantly. And again, I'm not too great at all the editing bits together. It looks too rough usually, but I did a good playthrough and matched it all up, and I'm quite proud of what I achieved. So, going to do the same with this week's episode and from every episode from now on. So yeah, go and have a look and enjoy it. Now let's move on to the Amiga news this week. There's quite a few bits. First one that caught my eye was on a site called GenerationAmiga.com, and this is just like a general Amiga news site. Quite handy, but this one made me chuckle. Basically, someone's created like a BitTorrent program to work on actual Amiga hardware, and then this is the press release. It says, Dizzytorrent, that's what it's called, is a functional BitTorrent client implemented for the Amiga that operates on real classic hardware. Dizzytorrent was implemented from scratch from the BitTorrent protocol specification alone and does not derive from any BitTorrent code from other sources. BitTorrent consumes 12% of total internet traffic in North America alone and 36% of total traffic in the Asia Pacific region. It's so popular that the copyright alert system targets BitTorrent traffic alone. BitTorrent may be popularly known as a method of piracy, but it isn't just for pirates. It's a useful, decentralized, peer-to-peer protocol with significant advantages over other protocols in many situations. End quote. Yeah, I mean, that just made me chuckle. I mean, BitTorrent has just been around for absolute years, and, piracy, and looking at it and you're thinking, why would anyone want to pirate stuff via an Amiga? But as we get much better tech coming along and stuff, and there's, people are emulating, is it OS 4 and 3.9, much better versions of Amigas, and some of them pushing it back onto original hardware. It's probably quite handy, especially with more improved internet browsers, I think, coming out. It's quite handy to have stuff like that, because you can just stick it on your Amiga. Not that I'm, saying piracy is a good thing, but if you're going down that route, or you want to just do file sharing, that's entirely up to do. You've now got the option. Another bit of interesting that's been in the news all week in PC world is this huge, I don't know what you call it, but basically Intel have announced that there's a problem with all like the chips made in the last 10 years that hackers are going to be able to get into the PC and jump in via the processor and stuff. It's all very technical, but one of the funniest thing I did notice that Amiga 1, who create a current string of current modern Amigas, have actually said that they are not affected by the Meltdown and Spectre bugs. So yes, Amigas are still okay to use, including the classic ones. There's no risk of bugs there. It does make me laugh though. They came out with that pretty much straight away off the back. Amigas are fine, hooray. But if you've got anything like an Apple device, the lot, iPads, phones, you name it, Android devices, they're all affected. You should update as soon as possible. It's a bit of a pain in the backside, all this happening. I mean, it hit me with what I do at work as well, and loads and loads of updating that's going to be going on behind the scenes. Happy days. Something else I noticed, Amiga Island, the meetup is happening on the 19th till the 20th of January. You've still got time to book tickets. But they basically opened something called the Commodore Creative Competition. And it says, send or bring your submission, demo, mod, application, game, or something completely different. Knit a scarf, make a cake, make a painting. Enter via info@amigausers.ie. I think this has turned into a regular thing, but apparently it's going to be judged by a panel of judges. Closing date for entries is January the 17th. You'll still have time for when the podcast is up, so jump in there if you're attending. I thought that was quite interesting, actually. Anyway, especially with the baker cake part. I mean, what are you going to do, make the Commodore symbol? Yeah. And that's about it, really. Oh, in other news, I am working. I know AMIGArama.com it's not the most amazing of websites because I'm jumping off the back of Blogspot. And it's not that I don't know what I'm doing. I am messing around with creating a website. I was going to do it over the Christmas weeks, but I had other stuff going on, and I started doing the footage cover, and I just ran out of time. Isn't that crazy? I had 2 weeks off work, and I'm just messing around, and I just couldn't get around to doing it. But yeah, I'm getting around to it now. I'm looking at building a WordPress website and everything, and we'll be able to it'll look decent, much better than what I've got now, because that just uses standard blog pictures, and it'll all be nice and lovely, and I hope you're all going to appreciate it at the end. What can I say? It's time to move on to this week's game, Batman the Movie. Now, this was developed and published by Ocean, released in 1989. It came on just 2 floppy disks. Now, at the time, the whole Batman thing was a massive, massive start of a long dead franchise, really. We'd not seen anything from Batman from pretty much from the 60s and possibly the early 70s when they did the movie. That might have been at the same time as well. But, Batman had been long forgotten. There wasn't really an interest in bringing that sort of thing back. And then Tim Burton came in and just created this, I don't know, it's like a franchise starter. It just became a huge beast and a behemoth later on, which just conquered all things. I don't know what else you can say to it, but even as a little kid, I'd have been about 9 or 10 at the time, but it just absolutely blew me away. I mean, it included it still is to this day, I think, one of the best ever Batmobiles. Nice, gorgeous, like, gothic designs, really dark and gritty atmosphere for not just Batman, but the whole of Gotham City. There was nothing really like it, and it still holds up, I think, as a film incredibly to this day. Now, the story of the game and effectively the movie, pretty much the same thing, because, one's based around the other. But basically, a criminal called Jack Napier ends up killing, I'm about to destroy this is spoiler territory here. You must have seen this film by now. I mean, come on, why would you be listening to a podcast about Batman the game? But yeah, Jack Napier kills Bruce's parents, and then it changes him into Batman, and then he doesn't realise this until much later. But at the same time, he ends up pushing, quite by accident, I think. Anyway, pushes Jack Napier into a big vat of acid. He becomes an even angrier Jack Nicholson, who in turn becomes the Joker. And the entire film is based off how these two outsmart and outwit each other. And it's just a bloody good action romp and a lot of fun. It's one of my favourite Jack Nicholson films. Anyway, the thing is, at the time, Batman was an absolute craze. I mean, it was everywhere. I mean, I think even I had a plastic lunchbox at the time. I had a Hot Wheels Batmobile. It's absolutely crazy for it. It was everywhere. It affected so many different things. People were going nuts for it. I mean, it's hard to describe now because we have so many big franchises that come out and affect people in different ways. And, everybody, like, look at the recent, like, Star Wars trilogy that started up again. That sort of, that was new back in the late 80s. There was nothing real like that, especially for a superhero. So Batman just came from nowhere and just changed things completely. And then they've never been able to move away. Well, then again, why would they want to move away from that darker side of that character and how tormented he is by the death of his parents and how he deals with it? And I'm going off on a tangent about Batman. Anyway, it's a good story and it's a good history. So yeah, anyway. Now, David Pleasance at the time was the Commodore Amiga sales guy, and he was looking at licenses and things, and he saw something special in Batman. And he could see what was coming, I think, was the tide of change, so to speak, probably from early scripts and things. But he basically came up with this idea of having an Amiga 500 backpack. And what that consisted of was basically 4 games, Batman as the big title with a symbol on the box, New Zealand Story, game called Interceptor, and Deluxe Paint 2. Now, for the time, packs like this were quite a regular thing, especially in the UK. I mean, I even at the time, I had like a ZX Spectrum pack, and there was like Master System pack and things like that. It was just the norm, but there was something different about this. There was nothing had been a big push with like a movie like this before, and licensed games at the time, they didn't really have that sort of stigma or that attitude, oh, it's going to be a poor game. Anyway, he made the right decision because close to release this, they managed to sell about 100,000 systems within months. It was absolutely incredible. And in the time it was for sale, they managed to sell 2 million Amigas off the back of it. And then they launched the backpack in October 89, and they were only selling it till September. So less than a year, 11 months really, until later. So it hit the Christmas crowd there, but it just kept selling and selling and selling. And that was even at £399, which in the late 80s was a hell of a lot of money, but it got people on board. People were interested. I mean, this is one of the earliest games I ever remember playing on an Amiga. Now, Commodore made one hell of a push as well for this at the time, with TV adverts basically saying that the Amiga was a games machine that was capable of word processing. So it was enough to get the kids to trick the parents into getting, oh yeah, I'll just use it for homework. I mean, not mentioning the fact that you need some sort of printer, and no schools were actually dealing with that sort of technology at the time. But it was quite a regular thing, I think, in the UK. I mean, I tried it myself when I was after a Spectrum, I think. So it was just the norm. But yeah, I mean, it just took the whole market by storm. It was just such a huge success, and a big chunk of it belongs to this game specifically because it just had that huge interest. It had all that hype behind it. You had a great movie going alongside it, and it all blew up and became something really, really special. Now, Ocean had a real reputation at this time for coming up with like identikit style games. They had a certain, they'd have a mix of, say, a platform section, a shooting section, a puzzle section, a driving section, things like that all tied in. They were very, very similar, especially across the like movie style titles. And they didn't drop that for Batman. I mean, especially off the back of RoboCop, this was one of the main things that they used that system for. And because of that, it consists really, the whole game consists of like 5 levels, but they're really like mini levels or mini games if you like. Now, I'm not going to review it as a whole because these separate levels, well, most of these separate levels are really should be defined as their own things. So I'm going to take a closer look at each one. The first level is what's known as the access plan. I mean, the game does follow the film story quite closely and really well, considering what they could do at the time. You get to control Batman simply walking left and right. There is no jump option, which seems a little odd, but the added benefit is you can throw batarangs left and right, or you can throw your bat rope either up above or off into a direction and then swing from platform to platform, which sounds more difficult than it actually is. I mean, that part in particular always reminded me of the Bionic Commando game, especially with that bat rope. I know it's not like a bionic arm, but it's very, very similar in style of how it all works. Along the bottom of the screen is a simple yellow bar, which is shaped like the Batman belt with the symbols on, and that keeps the score, shows your life. This was quite an interesting touch, actually, because the life bar is actually, it's a picture of Batman, and then as you lose health, slowly a picture of the Joker appears, and it's very, very simple, but it always reminds me of Nightmare, that TV series back in the day, where the face of the Dungeoneer slowly turns into a skull. So it works actually quite well. You have a group of enemies attacking you, nothing too amazing really. Some throw grenades, some fire guns at you, but all enough. Even though you can't actually jump, you can duck to some degree, and there's enough platforms and stuff dotted around that you can keep out of the way. And in the first level is meant to be an introduction, and it works out quite well. It does get a bit more difficult towards the end of that level, but it does show you how to control Batman and what to do, and it works quite well as an introduction. Now after this, you move on to level 2, which is quite a graphical powerhouse for the Amiga. It's still impressive to this day what you can actually do, but you're basically driving the Batmobile. It's from it's behind the car sort of view. There's lots of explosions on the road, lots and lots of enemies to come at you. Basically, you've got 3 attempts to hook a direction, which is always indicated by a huge arrow on the screen. And basically, if you miss 3 times, you end up crashing into a police roadblock and you lose a life. Now, there is a time limit to it, but if you're quick enough on the controls, you can usually get through this without too many difficulties. I did struggle a bit, but what can I say? I'm not very good at these sort of games. But again, this is a sort of mini driving games, and it works well. It matches what you see in the movie. The Batmobile looks great. The graphics are nice. It's very colourful. I mean, I think at the day it was really used as a way to show off of what the Amiga could actually do, and this level's the perfect example of it, especially for this is the late 80s, so compared to other stuff at the time, this was a very, very big game. Now, the third level is very strange, and I can sort of understand why they included it for story purposes, but basically you have to come up with the solution to the chemical that the Joker is poisoning the Gotham citizens with. And you get a simple screen where you can use the Batglove to pick different chemicals and from clues which are presented to the right hand side. And when you get the right answer, you move on to this next one. I think you've got to get 3 to be able to pass on. You've only got a minute to get through this, which is why it's quite strange, because this feels more like it should be a bonus stage. And it's not really too much of a difficult puzzle, and you can get, if you persevere, you can push through it, but it's very, very quick, and there's not much to it, and I don't understand why it was a separate level. Maybe if they'd have expanded this a bit more and done something a bit more complicated, but it's very, very strange. Level 4 is really the meat of the game, especially the driving sections, because you're out in the Batwing, fly up and down and left and right and stuff. And the whole point of it, you have to collect you have to not collect, but you have to snip balloons between a vehicle on the road and the rope in the middle, and then what's flying. So again, a good representation of the film, because that's taken right from that scene in the movie where Batman swoops in with a Batwing and then sorts them all out. But it's so fast and it's so quick. You only get 3 minutes to collect all this. It's actually quite difficult. But the thing is, underneath the Batwing on the ground, you actually get to see like the Batman symbol as if it was a shadow, and it just looks bloody good. And with the action elements, it's really, really quick. It's really quite difficult again, but it's doable if you persevere and keep trying. It's not too over the top crazy hard. I mean, I quite enjoy going through this section, and again, it's got that added element of the super fast speed and the fact you're flying above the road, whereas in the car you were very, very limited in what you can do. The 5th level is pretty much the same as the first, except this time, rather than being set in the Axis chemical plant, you're out in the cathedral, and it's the big showdown from the main game. I mean, there's not many levels to the game, but they do follow the story of the film and the main key points in it quite well. But in this one, you've got to get from the bottom of the cathedral, work your way. It's quite a long level. I think it's longer than the Axis Chemical one. They've upped the difficulty compared to the first. There's a lot more enemies. There's things like spikes in the ground now, which, instant kill if you touch them. More shooters and bad guys wandering around. And there's also rats as well, which you can't actually seem to take out, or I've never been able to manage it, though you can seem to do it if you use the bat rope to swing across and flick through them, and then it takes them out. But that's very, very difficult because they're quite low to the ground. Now, the added benefit of this bit is because it's following the movie quite closely. When you get to the top, and I'm afraid I couldn't manage it, it was too difficult, though I did get quite far. I had to, I had to cheat a bit and I had to go and watch the ending on YouTube. But when you get to the top of the cathedral, you walk off to the right and you'll see the Joker climbing up a ladder to the helicopter, and you've got like a couple of seconds, you've got to think on your feet, but if you sling your bat rope up at him and hit him, it pulls him off and he plunges absolutely miles past the entire level that you've been working your way up, and you see it speeding down as he flies with it, and then you think, oh, it'll just cut out at that point. It doesn't. It flicks to the floor at the bottom of the cathedral and it shows him hitting the ground with a thud, and there's no blood or anything, but I was just watching, I was like, my God, I can't believe they put that in. But it just works so bloody well, especially for an end of the game and how that level works. And it matches up to the film as well. The minigame system does work quite well for this in a way, because it's never boring. There's always different things to try and review, and I think that's one of the things why it sticks out in a lot of people's mind as one of them great launch pack games, because there's just so much to it. And even though I'm saying that, I mean, even though it's only 5 levels, the fact that the driving sections are so much fun and then the platform sections are entertaining, I don't think anyone's really excited about the pullman elements of it. But as a package as a whole, it's quite meaty and it seems like there's a lot to it. So I'm not surprised that it's so revered. Now, playing this through today, I did get this feeling of, even though I went through all levels, that it needed just a bit more. It could have done with 1 or 2 more levels, maybe in the middle, just to stretch it out. I mean, they could have done another similar type of puzzle game if they were short on time and stuff, just to pad the levels out a bit more. I mean, what you get there is, I can't really complain about that. It's not really a bad thing. It just feels like it just needs a little bit more, and it would have been like the perfect package. I mean, it's far from perfect. I mean, it does have a couple of issues. One of the biggest and one of the strangest ones is it does not have the Danny Elfman theme, which is the huge, the big Batman thing, which made him famous. He went on to produce so many things. Now, this is the guy behind like The Simpsons, I think, Independence Day, and all these big films and stuff like that. And it's just weird that it's not in this game, and it must, all I can think is it must have been the timing, and maybe there was licensing issues or something, because I think this game came out roughly the same time as the movie, so they might maybe not have produced the music yet, or it wasn't in a watchable state for the Ocean guys to see. I mean, the history of Ocean usually seemed to be that they would get the scripts really, really early, and then they'd have to come up with game ideas off the back, and often they wouldn't get to see anything beyond the odd set. So I suppose it was probably a timing thing, and they didn't get to see hear the music in full, but I couldn't really confirm that, and I did do some digging, but sadly there was nothing there. I mean, the theme they put in there, it's perfectly serviceable. It's not too exciting. It's not Danny Elfman's theme, which is just a shame, and it's just a surprise they didn't maybe come back later when they did a re-release and force its way into the game somewhere, but that's just me. Sound-wise, I mean, like I said, the music's passable. The effects were all okay. Nice big explosions and gun effects and stuff. I quite like them. It does have some voices screamed out. Probably my favourite one is Batman saying, "I'm Batman." I mean, that is just absolutely straight from the movie. It's the perfect line. But the rest of the towns, I mean, one of the weirdest things is when you sling the bat rope. I mean, I had to write, and I've even made a note about this because it's just so odd. It just sounds like something sliding through a bucket of wet. I don't know how to put on a bucket of wet rags. What a strange thing to think. It's just so bizarre and odd and cute. Just play it and you'll see what I mean. I suppose another thing with the platform sections as well in particular, I mean, they are designed well around not needing to jump, because you can use the bat rope, but there's still a few points where it feels like there's plenty of platforms with a short gap between them where it felt like you could just, rather than use the rope, I'd just be happy enough to jump and swing across and go that way. But I suppose it was limited by the Amiga with its stupid, one button press on the joystick. I'm still not sure what happened with that. I mean, the Amiga didn't come with a joystick as default, so I wasn't not sure really why so many developers decided to stick with that single button, because you've got the entire keyboard there. Sure, there must have been an option to think, oh, well, some joysticks are going to have more than one button. And I've got one myself with multiple button presses on. They were quite common at the time, so who knows? So yeah, probably one of its biggest problems really is it's probably the length, and it could have just done with a bit more tweaking here and there. But I mean, it's enjoyable enough. For a Batman game, don't forget. For the time, this reviewed actually fairly well. But you talk about 80 to 90%. I mean, there's the odd one, I think, in the mid-90s. But I've got a small list here. Amiga Action gave it 82%. C&VG, 93%. CU Amiga, 88%. The One, 82%. It's quite mixed, or it's on the high end there. I mean, for a packing title, this was the bee's knees, and it's still an enjoyable game to go back to. So I can understand these mixed results, because it was just like, there's so much to this game, but at the same time, it feels like it just needs a bit more. It's not that special. I'm surprised it got anything past 90%, to be honest, because it's like, by and far, it is not a bad game. I still enjoy playing it to this day. I mean, for decades, I was saying, and then I'm talking right up until like Arkham Asylum came out on modern systems, I thought this was the Batman game to play, because it was absolutely awesome. Going back to it today, I've still got a lot of fond memories with it. It's still a good romp and a good action game and stuff on it. I mean, for what it is and for what it does, it shows off what the Amiga can do, especially them driving sections. They really, really are special, and I can understand why Commodore, and especially David Pleasant, must have been so excited to get this in, because it's what the Amiga needed. It's like, it was the equivalent of like Sonic or Mario, and it's not the same type of game, but just the fact that it showed off so much, showed what the system could do. It was a good enough game, a more than good enough game, especially for a pack-in title, and it just did the job well. I would really like to hear what people thought of this as a game and as a pack-in, because my experience with it was much like, I did manage to play it back in the day. It's not from myself owning an Amiga. I've managed to go around to a friend and play it and stuff, but it was one of those games I always wanted from when I first played it, and it was one of the first ones I think I got a pirate copy of. But what can you do? But what did you guys think of it? You know, I mean, was it a pack-in title for you, or did you pick it up later? What did you think of it? I mean, one of the main things I thought at the time, I mean, I was absolutely crazy about because I wanted the Amiga version. I knew I had a Specky, so I went and picked up there was a +2 version, so it was the 128K. And I will say that the driving sections and the battering section were completely different on those, because it couldn't do the outrun style behind the car graphics well for what would have been a mini game. And they did like a side-on driving view. And I actually felt that worked a lot better. And even that, maybe come to think about it, that would have made a much better side-on minigame as something later on. Maybe you were planning routes of things, but it was just a really, really fun driving game. And I can remember I must have broken about 3 or 4 joysticks back in the day, just slinging them on the ground in frustration, because I was absolutely stumped by it. But again, the Amiga versions are pretty good, but I'm moaning over a classic. Overall, it just really, really holds up well, and if you were getting an Amiga fresh, I would say this would be one of the first games you should pick up, just because it had such an effect, it made such a difference, and it still holds up pretty well. It's very enjoyable. I will still be going back to this for years to come. And with that, I think that'll be the perfect time for finish. As always, guys, thanks for listening, and please look forward to next week's episode.